I just found out why my boyfriend never holds my toddler niece. For the past 5 years, I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend Jay, who's 28, just a year older than my 27 years. Our bond has grown strong, and we've become deeply involved in each other's families. Marriage has even been on our minds. But there's this one topic that always makes things a bit tense: children. Whenever we broach the subject, Jay becomes a bit distant. It's not like he outright rejects the idea, but there's a noticeable lack of enthusiasm. As someone who's always dreamed of having kids, it's disheartening. Jay's response is always the same. He's okay with whatever makes me happy. And for a while, that was enough for me. I convinced myself that I was content with the situation. But things took an unexpected turn during this holiday season. Our holiday routine has been pretty consistent over the years. Jay usually spends Christmas Eve and dinner with my family, and then I join his family for Christmas Day. But this year was extra special for me because it was the first Christmas I got to spend with my adorable niece Anna, who's just turned 2. Anna had a tough start, spending her first Christmas in the hospital due to some health challenges. Thankfully, she's doing much better now. I was determined to make this Christmas memorable for both of us. We spent hours playing together, laughing and sharing special moments. We opened gifts side by side, and to make it even more magical, I reenacted Anna's favorite storybook using her beloved doll. To top it off, we wore matching outfits that had us looking like the cutest duo around. My sister Amy, who's 30, was really grateful to me for giving her and her husband a break from childcare for the whole day. She noticed, though, that Jay seemed a bit distant with Anna. Throughout the day, she saw him mostly sitting on the couch, watching me play with Anna, or helping my mom with the dishes. I admitted to Amy that I'd noticed Jay's distance too. I'd always thought maybe he felt a bit awkward or hesitant to play with Anna since he's just my boyfriend and not a family member yet. Amy reassured me that it was okay. She and her husband already see Jay as part of our family, and they don't mind at all. I went back to Jay and tried to encourage him to join in the fun with Anna, especially since we were setting up her new dollhouse. However, he mentioned he wasn't feeling well. He ended up grabbing a few more beers and retreated to the porch by himself, scrolling through his phone. I didn't want to push him too much, thinking maybe he truly wasn't feeling well. Just to give a bit more context about Jay, it's important to know he's not someone who drinks excessively. He's a genuinely sweet, wonderful, and funny guy. At times, he can be a bit introspective and lost in thought, but he's never shown any signs of being abusive, manipulative, or moody. Plus, he only drinks on special occasions. On Christmas Day, we had lunch with Jay's family. After the meal, I offered to help with the cleanup alongside Jay's mom, Mary, who's 62, and his brother, John, who's 31. Jay's family is truly wonderful. They're incredibly supportive and sweet, always there for us without being overly nosy or intrusive. They strike the perfect balance of checking in on us without overstepping any boundaries. As we tidied up the dishes and cleared the table, Mary asked me about my sister's baby, remembering that they had helped with the bills when Anna was hospitalized last year. I happily shared the good news that Anna is now in great health and had the chance to spend this Christmas at home with us. Their faces lit up with joy upon hearing that Anna was doing well. I then decided to open up to them about something I'd observed with Jay. I thought maybe Mary could offer some advice on how to approach the situation since Jay isn't naturally the playful with kids type. As we were talking, John casually mentioned something like, "Oh, maybe it's because of Rosie," but Mary quickly hushed him. Rosie was the daughter of Jay and John's eldest sister Beth, who's 35. I never got the full story because it seemed to be a sensitive topic that everyone kept close to their hearts. All I knew was that Rosie had tragically passed away at the young age of 3. After her passing, Beth and her husband had moved away, and I'd never had the chance to meet them in person. Later that night, as the evening wore on and a few drinks were had by Mary, John, and some other family members, they chose to share the story with me. I hadn't pressed them for details. They seemed ready to talk about it. It turns out, Jay, being the youngest among the siblings, had a special bond with Rosie from the start. When Rosie was born, Jay was just around 14 years old. He took on the role of the super fun uncle, much like I am now with Anna. Rosie and Jay were incredibly close. She was his little best friend. Then, one fateful summer in 2012, Jay was playing with Rosie outside. He was blowing bubbles and Rosie was gleefully chasing and popping them. Suddenly, a car driven by a distracted woman on her phone sped into their yard, heading straight for Rosie. Jay's quick instincts kicked in, and he managed to grab Rosie just in time. The car hit him instead, but the force of the impact caused Rosie's head to whip back as he held her close. Jay suffered multiple severe injuries, internal bleeding, and was in a coma for 3 agonizing days. Despite his courageous efforts, Rosie tragically didn't survive the accident. The whole tragic incident was captured by a neighbor's CCTV, so everyone in the community saw Jay's heroic attempt to save Rosie. It even made the local news, highlighting Jay's brave actions. However, Beth was consumed by grief and found it hard to see Jay's bravery. Instead, she harbored resentment towards him, blaming him for not being able to save her precious daughter. In an effort to heal and move forward, Beth and her husband made the difficult decision to move to another country. Since then, they've kept their distance from the family, maintaining minimal contact. Jay took Rosie's loss incredibly hard. He carried a heavy burden of guilt, blaming himself for not being able to save Rosie and for missing her funeral because he was still hospitalized. According to Mary, Jay was profoundly affected by the tragedy. He withdrew from children, becoming more distant and reserved. He became quieter and more antisocial, retreating into himself. At times, he struggled with anger issues, though thankfully they've largely subsided over time, and I haven't personally experienced any problems in that regard. Living in an area where therapy isn't commonly accepted or sought after, Jay never had the opportunity to seek professional help to process his grief and guilt. Learning all of this was incredibly overwhelming, and I found myself in tears, realizing the heavy burden Jay had been carrying all these years. This tragic event had become a kind of taboo within the family, a secret that no one dared to bring up for fear of Jay's emotional well-being, even though he hasn't shown any violent or self-harm tendencies since then. It was more of a precautionary measure, just to be on the safe side. They hadn't shared this with me earlier because they thought Jay might eventually open up about it himself. I explained that Jay had never mentioned it to me, and honestly, I hadn't really thought to ask him about it either. I thanked everyone for trusting me with this deeply personal story and assured them that I would talk to Jay about it when the time felt right. They were supportive and understanding, telling me to reach out if I ever needed help or support. For now, my main focus is on letting Jay enjoy the holidays and his remaining vacation days from work without any added stress or pressure. Now, I find myself at a loss on how to approach Jay about all of this. I'm aware that seeking professional help to address the trauma and grief, even after all these years, should be a priority. But I'm unsure about how to broach the subject with him, or even when the right moment might be to bring it up. What I do know is that I want Jay to feel loved and supported unconditionally. I want him to understand that I'm here for him every step of the way as he works through his healing process. This is especially important to me as we've talked about building a family together in the future. I want him to be in a place of healing and peace as we take those steps towards our shared future. Update 4 months later. It's been some time since I posted my initial story, and I've got some significant updates to share for those who are interested. If you haven't seen my previous post yet, you can check it out on my profile. I've taken some time to gather my thoughts and organize them to ensure I don't miss any important details. A lot has happened since my last post, so I've divided my update into sections to make it easier to follow along. Quick recap. Jay and I have been together for 5 years now. Over the course of our relationship, I've noticed that Jay tends to keep his distance from children, including my niece Anna. This past Christmas, Jay's family finally opened up about the reason behind his behavior, revealing a heartbreaking incident that took place over a decade ago. Jay was incredibly close to his toddler niece Rosie. One tragic day while they were playing outside, they were struck by a distracted driver. Jay acted heroically, trying to shield Rosie from harm. As a result, he sustained severe injuries, but sadly, Rosie didn't survive the accident. Following this devastating event, Beth, Rosie's mom and Jay's sister, grew distant and cold towards Jay. A few months later, she and her husband decided to move to another country in an attempt to cope with their grief and start fresh. Since then, Jay's personality has undergone a noticeable change. He's become more reserved, cold, and antisocial. Despite the obvious need, he hasn't sought professional help to deal with his trauma. This tragic incident has become a closely guarded secret within Jay's family, referred to as their dirty secret. Part 1. The Confession. Ever since discovering the truth about Rosie and sharing my story here on Reddit, I've been torn about how to handle the situation. Many of you offered varying perspectives, all of which were valid. However, knowing Jay and his likely reaction, I decided to keep the family secret to myself until I found the right moment to discuss it with him. Unexpectedly, that moment arrived sooner than I had anticipated, prompted by a pregnancy scare back in January. I had a false positive test result, and the whole ordeal was emotionally exhausting. In the span of a single day, I went through a whirlwind of feelings before confirming that I wasn't actually pregnant. When Jay returned home that evening, I knew I couldn't keep the scare from him. I reassured him that the test was a false positive and there was no cause for concern. However, the news seemed to hit him like a ton of bricks. I watched as all the color drained from his face, leaving him looking ghostly pale. His hand, which I was holding, became clammy, cold, and shaky. In a panic, he hurried to the refrigerator to grab some water, clearly on the edge of a breakdown. It was in that tense moment that I knew I had to come clean about what I had learned about Rosie. I felt it was crucial to be honest with Jay, as I suspected that my revelation was the root cause of his distress. I reassured him that I was there for him, no matter how he chose to react. I apologized profusely for betraying his trust and keeping the truth from him for so long. I also urged him not to be upset with his family, emphasizing that they had good intentions when they shared the information with me. Throughout our conversation, I found it difficult to gauge Jay's emotions. His face was unreadable, leaving me uncertain whether he was on the verge of expressing anger or breaking down in tears. I let him know that we didn't have to delve deeper into the topic if he wasn't ready, but that I was available to listen and offer support whenever he felt comfortable opening up. In response, Jay asked me a surprising question: if I wanted to break up with him. I was taken aback by his question and quickly reassured him that this was not the case. We shared a comforting hug, after which he expressed the need for some time to process everything before we could further discuss the matter. I respected his request for space. For the remainder of the week, we tried to maintain a sense of normalcy in our interactions. However, there was an undeniable tension between us, making everything feel a bit awkward as we navigated this new reality. Part 2, the talk. 8 days later, we set aside time to have a serious conversation about everything that had come to light. Jay began by apologizing for not sharing the truth with me sooner. He confided that in the past, his honesty about Rosie had led to his then-girlfriend ending their relationship. Hearing this, he expressed immense relief when I assured him that I wouldn't react the same way. He opened up about how the weight of the incident had been a burden on him ever since. He acknowledged that he had never sought professional help to cope with his trauma, but mentioned that he was open to the idea. However, he also admitted that he didn't feel ready to face those emotions just yet. Jay expressed a fear that delving into therapy might unearth deep-seated issues that could negatively affect our relationship. Jay shared something else with me that was quite touching. From the moment Rosie was born, he felt an instant, deep connection with her, along with a strong sense of responsibility, even as a teenager. Having Rosie in his life made him realize his desire to become a father someday. However, after the tragic accident, he became fearful of making mistakes and causing harm, which made him hesitant about having children, despite his deep-rooted desire to be a dad. In response, I reassured him that we were on the same page regarding our future together. While I share his desire to have children someday, I emphasized that I didn't want to rush him into anything before he felt truly ready. Jay also opened up about feeling a twinge of jealousy whenever he sees me with Anna, my niece. He expressed a deep desire to join us during those moments, but holds himself back as a precaution. I reassured him that he doesn't need to distance himself and that he's always welcome to join in on our family moments. To further put his mind at ease, I let him know that my sister and the rest of my family already see him as one of us. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Jay made a playful joke. He said that now that I knew everything about his past and still chose to be with him, I should expect a marriage proposal any day now. We both shared a hearty laugh, but we agreed that before taking such a significant step, we should focus on his healing and our shared journey towards building a family. Part 3, Beth. As we continued our conversation, Jay shared another heartbreaking piece of information. During the peak of the pandemic, Brian, Beth's husband, had reached out to him. Brian informed Jay that Beth had contracted COVID-19 and was hospitalized. Due to mounting medical bills and unemployment, Brian was struggling financially. He also revealed that Beth had been in a near catatonic state since Rosie's tragic passing. Despite Brian's efforts to seek help for Beth, she had been resistant to professional intervention. After a particularly concerning incident of self-harm, Beth spent a year in an institution. Over the past 10 years, she has remained emotionally distant, withdrawn from society, and hasn't been able to fully cope with the loss of her daughter. It turns out the rest of Jay's family was also aware of Beth's struggles, but they chose to keep it within the family. They had been providing financial support to Brian to assist with Beth's care. Their narrative was that Beth had become more distant after their relocation, framing it as a simple matter of going low contact. To clarify further, Jay mentioned that Beth had never blamed him for Rosie's tragic accident. While he had initially felt responsible during his younger years, it was more their parents' way of interpreting events and framing them to protect the family's image. When Brian reached out to Jay directly years later, it shed new light on the situation for him. Despite this, Jay admitted that he still hasn't fully come to terms with everything and continues to carry some guilt. Part 4. Our current situation. At present, we're considering couples therapy as a way to address our shared challenges in a supportive and non-judgmental environment. We've found a therapist who seems like the perfect fit for us and have completed 6 sessions so far. From what I've observed, Jay appears to be feeling lighter and less weighed down by his past. Our therapy sessions often include homework assignments, and to my surprise, Jay has been the one to remind me to complete them. It's been heartening to see him take an active interest in our healing process, and I'm hopeful that therapy will continue to help him navigate his emotions and feelings of guilt. At the moment, my main hope is that Jay will eventually feel ready to talk openly about Rosie and begin the healing process for his own sake, not just for our relationship. It's crucial for his mental and emotional well-being to address his trauma, but I understand that this is something that will unfold in his own time, and there's no rush. Although Jay isn't active on social media, I shared my original Reddit post with him. He spent a good 3 hours reading through all the comments and was visibly moved. It was a rare moment to see him teary-eyed, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support and kind words from so many strangers. We're both incredibly grateful for the warmth and encouragement we received from all of you. We even stumbled upon TikTok and YouTube versions of our story, which Jay couldn't resist checking out. He's still trying to figure out why some of the TikTok videos had Minecraft or cooking videos playing in the background, but I just laughed it off and told him it's probably a trending style on the platform. So if you've made it this far into our journey, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for taking the time to follow along. Despite the challenges we've faced, I'm optimistic about our future. We know there are still hurdles to overcome, but we're hopeful and committed to navigating them together. Edit. Jay and I have decided to share this Reddit account, so don't be surprised if you see him responding directly to comments occasionally. It's his first time navigating Reddit, so please be patient with him as he learns the ropes. I've already had to explain terms like OP and other Reddit lingo to him. But rest assured, we're both actively reading and appreciating all your comments and messages. Thanks again for your kindness and support.